you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all right now. So compromise is really thinking, what do I value most right now? What's most important to me? And how can I prioritize that? And it's really a gift, everything else. To preserve attachment to others, oftentimes when we're younger, it feels like we have to suppress all of our needs. And at times it feels like we have to do that again as adults. But really, it's about preserving attachment while creating space for the needs that are essential for us in the moment. It doesn't mean that we're both going to be able to do everything we want, but knowing that it's fluid. Just because I'm prioritizing this thing now doesn't mean that this is setting a precedent. It truly is a give and take.
Welcome to Normalize The Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicherter. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Sabrina Romanoff, a licensed clinical psychologist, professor, and researcher specializing in anxiety, trauma, and life transitions. In this episode, we look at how to repair and rebuild after relationship ruptures, like infidelity, separation, or long-standing disconnection. Join us as we unpack therapeutic strategies for real, lasting recovery in love and connection in both romantic and personal relationships. Whether you're healing or hoping to reconnect, this episode offers the tools to begin again with intention.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I am very excited for our conversation. Before we begin, I want to check in. How are you really?
I love this question. I love how you start this way. It's so authentic and genuine. I think I feel a little bit anxious just about the world. It's hard not to when it feels like everything is so up in the air and uncertain. And also as a therapist, like having my own anxiety and holding it for others. But I try to like maintain that anxiety with intention. So I manage it by focusing on very small steps I can take towards connection or growth. It's a way of kind of reminding myself that no matter what level of uncertainty we're facing, you can always have a choice to have community and you don't have to face it alone, which feels really powerful.
That is really powerful. And I guess I just graduated from my master's and I'm getting ready to apply for my associate's number. Very exciting baby therapist. And one thing that I've noticed for myself a lot is feeling like so much anxiety over what do I say because I don't even know how to process or begin. It's so hard right now.
Absolutely. I remember having that feeling too, especially when I was in training, like I have no words. And I remember a supervisor telling me something that was so freeing. It's like giving yourself permission to not know. And sometimes that's what the people we're speaking to, our clients, really want the most. It's like we're together in this big uncertain thing. And that can be so much more powerful than some elusive answer because there is no quick fix. And I think the healing power of community, it takes away that pressure, that burden, feeling like we have to hold it all on our own. So I think that's a huge way of regulating the stress.
I love that. It's so true. Oh, thank you. I needed that because I have a client next and so much anxiety over don't want to say the wrong thing, don't want to feel like I'm not there and showing up for them, and to know that maybe they just do need to know that we're in this together and community is so important. But switching to the topic of our conversation, today we're going to talk about relationship ruptures and repairs. So to kind of kick us off, can you talk to us about what a rupture in a relationship actually means?
Absolutely. So a rupture is any time in which we feel like our connection to our partner or someone else has been broken in some way, and they could be big or small. I think one of the biggest misnomers is that rupture is it destroys our relationships, and I actually find it's the opposite. So much growth comes from ruptures. I think ruptures on the surface, it feels like they're the things that break our relationships, but they actually reveal all the cracks that were already there. So I see the opportunity to recover from a rupture as this chance to examine all those cracks that in the past were all just building and went unsaid, or maybe we're being swept under the rug. So rupture is a chance for us to learn from them and build something even stronger. I think a healed relationship isn't about going back to the way things were pre-rupture, but it's actually about creating this new, healthier dynamic that honors everything you learned through that rupture process.
It's so common that we think a rupture means the end of the relationship, and we just assume this relationship is broken, it can't be fixed. And we often don't think that repair is possible or even know what repair is and how to begin.
Absolutely. I think also there's this mindset of like, we've gone through this rupture and divorce or ending, a breakup of a friendship, of a partnership, anything, it feels like the rupture can threaten our attachment. And you have a choice there, right? You could let the relationship go, or you could say, no, I'm going to really work on. When two people are agreeing on the latter, it makes them way more invested, which is why people can feel so much more connected after healing from a rupture.
That is so, I love this because a lot of times, I know for me, being a young adult trying to navigate dating in LA, not fun. And trying to figure out how to continue relationships, even if it just changes the nature of the relationship, even if we're not still together, being able to keep that friendship that felt so important, that brought us together in the first place, can be very powerful. And it seems to feel like it has to be either we're all in this in the romantic sense, or there's nothing for us. And that creates a lot of feeling of isolation, I'd say.
Absolutely. And it's completely avoidant to live in that black and white space. We think that it's easier when we make our lives more simplified and we're all in or all out, but it makes the relationship so hollow because there's so much that we're suppressing, we're sacrificing, that kind of goes underground to preserve the relationship. So instead, I would say go towards those ruptures or go towards those things that are really scary because it'll ultimately make you closer.
That's so true. So what are some of the common causes of rupture?
Great question. It depends really on the relationship. I would say in a romantic sense, it's often a sense of misaligned values or feeling like you're not totally being cared for. People often talk about the different love languages. And really, it's a way of showing the other person that you care about them in the way that they want to be cared for. So a common like quote in marriage therapy, it's never actually about the dishes. So many couples argue about dishes left in the sink or really small things that seem like they're very surface level, but there's so much usually that represents in relationships. So it could mean caring for your partner in a way that they want to be cared for. Dishes going away, that is a love language to them. So it's really about what the action represents. And it's really about being loved in the way that matters most to us.
It's almost never about the dishes. One of my very last classes, my teacher was saying that, and one thing he said that I really, really loved was there's often no communication behind any of it. So we're letting these things build up and we're assuming people understand what we're thinking and that they're thinking the same way. So when they are not doing something that we want, we assume it's intentional. And then we grow this like kind of bitterness and resentment toward them. And the same thing's happening for them because there's no communication on what our love language looks like, how we want someone to show up for us, what our emotional needs are, what that looks like to us, what feeling heard and feeling seen, feeling understood actually looks like. For some people, it might be just someone sitting there and really listening. It might be someone validating. It might be someone then going and doing an action after. But without that communication, we start to just feel like they don't care. This is intentional. And we're almost forcing the end of that relationship in a way.
So well said. I love that so much. And I'll remember that too, because I think it's so true. We're often like silent storytellers in our own silos. And as you were speaking, I was wondering, like, why do we do that? But I think it's a way of like building a case. It can feel so scary to just talk about our hurt feelings and feel like, oh, it's going to be received and met without defensiveness. So I wonder if we do that as a way to like strengthen our argument. Look at all the ways that you hurt me to kind of feel like I have enough gas to finally reveal kind of my hurt to you.
Exactly. And then we can justify a lot of times, at least the way he was saying it, was that we go into relationships with almost one foot out the door. We're assuming it's not going to work out. And we're justifying taking that step outside the door. We're justifying the end of the relationship that it was never going to work out to begin with because of all these things that are happening instead of actually giving ourselves the full chance. That really starts with communication. But communication is also scary because we don't know what the other person's thinking. And that opens us up to vulnerability. And if we're not comfortable with the vulnerability and emotional intimacy, then where do we even begin and get that courage to take the first step?
I love all of that so much. It's so true. We all have one step out the door, and for good reason. All of our past romantic relationships have failed for some valid reason. But why should we not be wary about investing so much in a new person? I guess it's like the self-sabotage is valid if we feel like the safest place truly is alone without anyone else. And maybe that is true, but it's also a very lonely place. So to be connected really is the trade-off of risking, really putting ourselves out there for someone else.
Exactly. It is so isolating. And I think, at least for me, I've noticed this shift in as I've gotten older and everyone around me online, right, is like getting married and having kids, and I'm not there yet. And feeling like, okay, well, I just have to learn to kind of love myself and be okay with myself. But then when opening the door for future romantic relationships or even friendships, right, it's like keeping that layer of protection for myself because if everyone leaves, at least I'm okay on my own. At least I'm safe and protected. No one can hurt me. No one can take away this feeling of autonomy and independence that took so long to cultivate. So then it just gets stuck in, like you said, that self-sabotage of I'll keep myself protected, but by doing that, I'm never really giving anything a chance.
Absolutely. And it so easily can become this self-fulfilling prophecy. If you imagine they're going to hurt me in some way, you're probably going to act in ways that you don't consciously realize are being defensive, or you're setting yourself up to polarize into that dyad of the person who's going to be hurt and the person who's making some transgression. So it really does require trust and looking for being kind of what you want in others.
And for those listening who are maybe noticing these ruptures of, maybe I haven't even fully given this relationship a chance. Maybe I haven't even begun to scratch the surface on building emotional intimacy, or cultivating a deeper intimacy beyond just that surface level check-ins, that expectation of this must be what they want going into this relationship, right? If we're noticing all these things, how can we begin to repair? What does repair even mean?
Great question. And I think there's so many ideas about it. I think the first step is that rebuilding after a rupture, it's not about erasing the past or the mistake. It's really about owning it. And that's almost always where the first foundational step is towards recovery. So that really starts when both partners can radically embrace that accountability because it's often co-construction, a rupture. Both partners play some kind of role in how they both got to where they are now. So the ability to say, this is how I contributed to the pain that we're in, and this is what I'm doing to really make it right, is the first step towards moving forward. And I think just that level of transparency and letting go of all resistance around it becomes that glue that holds the repair process together because it creates this trust. Like we're both exactly on the same page here, which is essential in moments when all that doubt it can feel overwhelming and makes you, again, take that final step out the door.
Accountability on both ends is so hard, though, because it's so hard to admit when you're wrong to begin with. I know I struggle with that sometimes. And it's easier to, from our perspective, right? I'll speak for myself. From my perspective, when I'm in a situation with someone and I'm seeing it only from my side, and I'm assuming this is intentional, they don't hear me, they don't care to hear me. It's so hard to recognize and really believe, well, I haven't been communicating what I need. And I haven't even been paying attention to what they need because I've been so focused on what I need. So to get to a place where I can then admit it and then open that door for a conversation with them so that they have the chance to also admit their side and then begin to work together and figure out what repair means for us. If it means continuing the relationship, what that relationship looks like, if it stays in the same direction it was going, if it completely shifts. But to even admit that I did something, right, that I've been part of it is hard. And then to communicate that to someone else and then hope that they do it. Like, how do you even begin?
It's so hard. I think most people find themselves in this tug of war game, right? There's one bad guy, there's one winner and one loser. No one wins with that mentality, though. It's almost like both people have their fingers in their ears. They refuse to listen to their person's side. Instead, they're both fighting to be in the victim role or the winner role. And I love how you said that. It's like accountability. It means like holding in front of the other person, this is what I contributed to this. And it kind of drops your ears. It drops all defensiveness. And the paradox is once we drop that tug of war rope, once we kind of show this is what I'm bringing to the table, the other person will do the same. But it takes that one brave person to change that dynamic and take a step forward.
Being the brave one is so hard. I heard this quote recently that was, are we fighting the problem or are we fighting each other? Mm-hmm. And that's something that's really hard to recognize and differentiate if we unconsciously are assuming the other person is the problem, and being able to really take that step back and explore, what is the disconnect here? Not even the problem, but the disconnect. Where is that disconnect coming from? And how can we begin to explore it more instead of fighting the other person to, like you said, win?
Absolutely. I love that mindset. And it's so important to pause and like look at the conflict together from the outside so you can feel aligned because it should always be you and your partner against the conflict that's dividing you.
And that's sometimes really hard to do because, again, going back, we both have to admit our accountability, take the accountability in both of it. And one thing you said was earlier, you specifically mentioned romantic relationships, which means this can also happen in different types of relationships. So, in what other relationships may we notice some form of rupture?
Absolutely. All of our relationships, right? At work, our coworkers, with our family, our parents, siblings. I see it a lot, most lately among friends. Friendship is taking on a new toll, and I think we're leaning on our friends more than we have in the past, especially as people are struggling so much with dating now. Their friendship circles really are their core support systems. But with deeper level of friendships also brings all these complicated feelings. And I think one of the hardest parts with friendships is really feeling like when your friendship is well intentioned and it feels like your friend really has your back, and also feeling like you guys are aligned and have the same goals moving forward. So I have a lot of patients right now who are contemplating friendship breakups. There's been a lot of ruptures over the years, and they're wondering, should I really stay in this? Is this really aligned with me? Or has this just been like a lifelong friend? And I feel strained or I feel like I'm not allowed to kind of let go of it.
Oh, that feels so relevant to me right now. I've been going through this phase where I really have recognized how much I struggle to connect with other people in general. I'm very unique for, I guess, my age. I started doing what I wanted to do when I was 12 and been working on this basically my entire life. So where I'm at, most people are figuring out what their passion is and what their purpose is and where they fit in. And we're in different transitional periods. And a lot of times I have to learn how to take a step back and relate to where they are, even though I was maybe a little bit younger at that point. And it's really hard because when I notice our values aren't as aligned as I thought they were, right? I'm very focused, hyper focused on impact and helping people. But I've also been to the point where that can be my focus. And a lot of times when I don't see that in people, I automatically turn this, well, they're not who I wanted them to be. This relationship is not going in the direction I thought it was supposed to go in. And I've become very, I think, hypercritical on other people and then start to kind of distance myself. And when they don't do what I would want them to do, I really want to say increase those cracks in the disconnection. Like I know that I'm doing a lot of it and having to learn how to take that step back and decide, like, is this a relationship worth fighting for? Am I putting too much of my own like insecurities and fears and goals, projecting that onto the other person? And if so, am I willing to take that step back? Or is this just going to be very unhealthy dynamic for both of us? It's so hard to figure out.
That was so insightful and so introspective also, saying, could I be projecting my own ambition and like striving for more onto other people? But what you said reminded me so much of that dichotomy. Is it better just to be alone than to be with other people and be disappointed in some way? And I think ultimately we hope to strive for having very realistic expectations and diversifying, right? Getting what we need and different things out of each relationship. But that also means grieving what people aren't and maybe what we want them to be. It's so hard to let go of that fantasy of kind of what we hope, especially when there's a new relationship, there's so much promise, and then accepting kind of what is and if that's good enough for us.
Yeah, grieving that expectation is huge. And it's not something that I realized until maybe, I want to say like 6 months ago in my own therapy. My therapist really made me sit back and talk about when I met each person, how I viewed that relationship, how I viewed whether it was romantic or friendship or even like family members, right? Whether it's colleagues, different people, how I immediately saw that relationship because we all have this initial like judgment of what this could look like and what this can be. And how many times did I plan out like all these things that we could create together? I'm very business oriented. And we learned that, I say we, she knew, I learned that I often I combine work and friendship and I see those relationships as the same. So being able to recognize, like, I am putting all of this onto other people. And if I'm going into every relationship with this expectation of what can come from it in a creative, kind of like mental health work ethic type way, I am not giving anyone the chance to live up to their potential. I'm not giving myself the chance to live up to my potential, create that connection. I am, again, self-sabotaging and automatically having that one foot out the door, waiting for something to not line up and then to leave the relationship instead of looking at where those disconnects in just my own judgment and perception are, being able to have that conversation and then repair in a way that moves us forward in a supportive and helping each other instead of a competitive or like forceful way.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying, it's one part is projecting your own self and maybe hoping that you'll meet yourself or a recognition of your own hopes and desires to connect in someone else. And it can be so disappointing when people aren't us or they don't extend that same graciousness that we give to them, but also, or that same ambition or whatever it is we're looking for in other people that we give so freely. And then maybe accepting this is where this person's at and I'm going to meet them there. And I think at the end of the day, it goes down to compromise. We're not going to get everything we need out of everyone, but maybe there's something so redeeming or something so valuable about this connection with this person that it's okay that we can tolerate our disappointment in other areas.
Oh, the word compromise. I feel like it's been given, at least I'd say in my life and in my circle, this negative connotation of it means I'm giving up a piece of myself or I'm taking away something that's important to me. So what does, I guess, like a healthy compromise look like?
I love that. And I think that sentiment is common. It feels like defeat in some ways. I love the quote that you can have everything you want, you just can't have it all right now. So compromise is really thinking, what do I value most right now? What's most important to me? And how can I prioritize that? And it's really a gift, everything else. To preserve attachment to others, oftentimes when we're younger, it feels like we have to suppress all of our needs. And at times it feels like we have to do that again as adults. But really, it's about preserving attachment while creating space for the needs that are essential for us in the moment. It doesn't mean that we're both going to be able to do everything we want, especially in romantic relationships. There's so much give and take, but knowing that it's fluid. And I guess it's where trust comes in too. Just because I'm prioritizing this thing now doesn't mean that this is setting a precedent. It truly is a give and take.
Oh, going back to childhood, right? In those early attachment wounds and being able to recognize how much they might trigger things now. And I guess for me, something that's really difficult is how do we create conversations about that in a way that's not maybe blaming the other person? Like, you're creating this wound, you're recreating this wound for me, you are triggering it. How do we come to the table with these conversations that allow for repair instead of for fighting?
Great question. One, it starts with insight, understanding where your wounds exist. So you're kind of ahead of the game and know when they're going to be opened or poked. So I think something helpful that I recommend clients do is keep a log, even on your phone, of the hot moments of the day or the week. What are the things that really get you fired up or really trigger you? Eventually, you'll notice the themes and you'll start to learn yourself better. So maybe it happens at work, or maybe it happens exclusively in these types of friendship relationships or only with the family. And maybe it's about a theme of you feeling like you're not getting recognition or feeling like you have to be caretaker to them. And then once you recognize the theme, you can notice how you might be contributing to that pattern. Do you also feel safer being in the caretaker role? Are you doing things that create this dynamic because it's so familiar to you? So insight is first, and then communicating it to your partner is different. I think it's so much more important to consider the process of how we communicate, in addition to just the content. So often we just focus on the words, and there's so much more that's communicated that can really be metabolized and understood if we look at the process. So something I love, it's called nonviolent communication. And it's kind of like a jarring term, but the idea is that you keep the whole focus on you. So all I statements, and focus on the impact that you're feeling or the hurt that you're feeling instead of using any type of defensive language. So no blame, no you, no like finger pointing at the other person. And that's how you'll truly start to get them to hear you.
Okay. Wait, that's such an easy tool, going back to what you first said, like tracking it on your phone, checking in with yourself. And a lot of times we don't check in with ourselves and we just wait till it all like comes out and comes to the surface. And then it's so easy to do the, well, you caused this, you did this, that blame. It's so, that's such an easy tool and trick that we can use to recognize, like, hey, this is what's impacting me. And when I recognize it and these themes coming up in my different types of relationships, how can I begin to build that conversation using the I statements? I'm feeling very overwhelmed and thinking about how, I feel like this desire to be needed. I feel this desire to be needed. And anytime I feel like disconnected from that, or you can do everything without me, I struggle with this sense of belonging, right? And that's something that's really big for me is I love to feel needed. I love to feel like I'm someone who can help people and offer value. And when people can do things without me, sometimes I start to feel, okay, what's my value in this relationship? How am I helpful? How am I showing up? Maybe I'm not the right person for them. And if I can't communicate that fear, then I am causing this more disconnect, causing these ruptures and not being willing to repair at all.
Absolutely. I think vulnerability can be so scary because we're really exposing ourselves and putting ourselves out there. But being vulnerable, it's so compelling and it truly allows other people to get closer to us. So again, it goes back to the idea of being the first person to take that step forward because it totally changes the dynamic and ultimately it's for the relationship moving forward.
Yeah. For someone who's never been vulnerable before, who maybe emotions are kind of scary for, and talking about them is even more terrifying, how would they begin to maybe like prepare themselves to open the door for that conversation?
It's a great question. I love the idea of positive visualization. So the idea athletes do this all the time. Like before a big game, they'll imagine themselves making the buzzer shot or performing really well, or even public speakers, they'll imagine going to the event and being really confident and succeeding at the task or the speech. So you can do this with your partner too, or your friend, or any big, scary relational moment that you have. Imagine in vivid detail in your mind what it's going to feel like, what you're wearing, what they look like, where you are, and then practice having a conversation that ends in a productive way where you're heard and they're receptive. So many times we do the opposite. We negatively rehearse these really scary moments. Again, we rebuild these scary stories to fuel our feeling of anguish and that we've been wronged. But we can actually do the opposite. And just that mental kind of vivid story we create of the positive of something happening successfully, it gives us confidence to actually fulfill that prophecy.
Oh my goodness, the amount of times I'm in my head, like picturing the conversation being a fight the entire time that's something that's been so frustrating to me. And I've started to recognize it, which makes it worse because I'm like, I have the awareness of it. Why am I still doing it? And I've started personally going for walks when that's happening and trying to get it all out and then switch the conversation and go back inside when I've switched it to a chance of a positive outcome. Just like the expectation that, not the expectation, but even the possibility that this could go well and going into it with an open mind instead of this is going to lead to a fight because then I'm creating that self-fulfilling prophecy. I am going in trying to say that one thing that's going to cause that fight. So I can be like, see, I can't talk to them about this. See, I was right.
I love that so much. And I think that's so helpful to realize, oh, I'm perseverating. I'm going in circles here. I need to get out. What do you think it is about the walk that changes your dynamic or how you see it?
I love the idea of getting outside to get out of my head. So being able to, I like to pay attention to the way maybe the sun feels on my skin or the wind or the sounds of the trees, the sounds of people around me, and becoming more present in the moment. Because when I'm in my head, I am so far in my head that I don't recognize. I mean, I can create like, I'm mad at them for a conversation we never even had. So being able to bring myself back to the present moment and see like, no, this is all me right now, me and my mind. And how can I begin to have some more control over it? But it requires that mindfulness and that grounding. And for me, it really is just being outside and having exposure to all these different things that remind me that it's me.
I love that. It's almost like our mind is constantly preparing us for danger. It's constantly anticipating a lion jumping out behind a tree that's going to attack us. And like we have to find a way to reprogram our primordial brains. And that's such a great way to remind yourself, like, I'm safe, I'm in nature, everything's okay. And I love that. And I think walking is such a beautiful way of like changing your environment and changing internally what's happening for you.
Yeah, and it really helps me start to reflect on, is it time to let go or should I keep trying to fix it? If the only thing I can come up with after like walking for 10 miles is a fight, then maybe I'm not even willing to fix this relationship. Maybe I'm looking for every single excuse to get out of it and I'm just not willing to open up that communication. I'm not really committed to a repair and I can recognize that. But if I don't give myself that chance to see, am I willing to even be open-minded or am I just looking for an excuse? It really helps.
I love that. It's almost like you're saying walking is a way to recalibrate everything. It helps you like trust, is this actually something I'm feeling or am I just getting stuck in my head? And it kind of creates this consistency. Like if I'm still feeling this way, that means that it's telling me something or it's a compass. It's telling me to kind of go towards it.
Yeah. And I guess what are some other signs that maybe it's time to let go instead of repair versus signs that it's repair is the best thing for both of us?
It's a great question. And I think a lot of couples struggle with this because so many times arguments or conflicts, they're cyclical. And oftentimes, couples on the surface, it looks like they're arguing about different things, but it's usually the exact same dynamic over and over again. For example, like the pursuer distancer. One person is constantly criticizing and the other is withdrawing. But the criticism is really a way to kind of pull their partner closer. And it feels like this constant race between them both. So I think the way to look at that is to kind of explore together or outsource, try to find a third party neutral person, like in therapy, to kind of see, is this something we both want to work on? Or does it feel like this is a band-aid? It feels like we don't both want to work on this. I think intention is key when looking at conflicts and arguments. A lot of times people kind of use these cyclical issues as avoidance. Like we're both kind of moving, we're both kind of stuck in this dynamic and it keeps them from stasis, from kind of just being present and realizing this isn't what we both want. It's almost like a distraction. So it's really about realizing this is our conflict. Do we really want to work on this? And then making those active steps towards change.
Exactly what's keeping us stuck and how can we begin to get unstuck? Are we willing to? I know I can go back to a friendship recently that is in the process, I think, of going through a repair. I noticed that this person who I think is so great, I do, and I really have so much admiration and respect for, but I noticed a lot of times they wanted to come over to my apartment and bring their friends and then expect me to host their friends. And well, I can't ask my friends to pay for any of the food or wine because we're hosting them. So then it's like costing me a lot of money. It's making me feel uncomfortable because I don't know any of these people who are in my space all the time. And I'm going into this thinking, oh, we're having a girls' night. And suddenly there's like 10 people in my apartment that I don't know. And I'm like responsible for feeding them and make sure there's enough wine. And I was constantly feeling so like agitated. And to that person, they're like, oh, I'm creating a community of girls. And to me, it was like, oh, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of, or I'm not respected, or I'm not as valued in this relationship as much as the space that I have. And being able to create that conversation of, you know what, I really just wanted a girls' night, me and you this time. Maybe next time we can invite more people over, possibly even someone I also know, so I don't feel so left out. And that's been really hard to say and see how the relationship changes. And is this something that's going to work out? And I hope it is, but at the same time, knowing that I really value feeling comfortable in my space. And if I'm constantly uncomfortable in my space and this conversation isn't going to work and it's not working, maybe it is time to let go. But really trying to have that repair first and that awareness that we're stuck because I was just continuing to allow it to happen and then creating this resentment in my own head until I got to the place where I was like, I'm like rambling now in a circle. But I got to the place where I was like, you know what? Maybe I should say something in a nice way and getting my mindset to a place where I can come from it as an I feel instead of you are making me feel.
Good for you for advocating for yourself. It can be incredibly scary. And I think very common. A lot of people question themselves. Should I just put up with it or should I go along with it? Am I being too much or am I not being generous enough? And again, it goes back to the very core trauma that almost all of us have felt, that to preserve attachment to our caregivers, we had to suppress some of our needs. And to this day, as adults, we still question, is there room for both of our needs in the relationship, or will my needs kind of always come at the expense of theirs? I like how you said, though, like the agitation was a sign you had to say something. I think our emotions are so often lessons, and anger, agitation, that's a sign that your boundary was violated. And I think it's so important to then advocate for positive change, like you said, and not dwell on the problem. So use the emotion as a lesson and then try to speak assertively about it instead of kind of staying in the conflict. Is this something that you did say to her or you're preparing to?
Yes, I did say it, and that girls' night ended up not happening because she wanted to have the big group. And that was totally okay because that's what she wanted at that time. It's not what I wanted in that moment. I was already feeling overwhelmed, having a lot of people in my space that I don't know. I have a lot of social anxiety. I was not going to be able to be nice, which I was able to recognize. I would have been a lot colder. So it didn't work out in the way that I wanted it, but it also opened this door for some kind of personal growth where I was able to recognize how I was feeling and how it was going to impact my behavior, how my thoughts are already fueling these emotions and this behavior. I was already creating a conflict that would not have been useful. So allowing that space for personal growth, you know what? This is how I'm feeling right now. And if I can move from that bitterness to that peace, that's going to be the most important component.
That's so powerful. I think it speaks to the fact that so often we abandon ourselves just to automatically say yes and keep the peace and give the other person what they want. And then we kind of get so angry with ourselves later, like we suffer, we're punished for it. So I love the idea of honoring yourself and doing what you know is best for you.
Yeah, learning to honor yourself. And sometimes not always put yourself first in a way that's maybe harmful to the other person, but putting yourself first in a way that preserves the nature of the relationship in a positive way if that's what you want. If you want to keep that relationship, how can you put yourself first in a way that sets both of you up for success? Really figuring out what your boundaries are and how you can articulate that to the other person. And also be willing to accept their boundaries and hear their boundaries and find, like you said way earlier, that compromise. But as we're wrapping up, what is one last piece of advice you can leave our audience with, someone who's listening to this and recognizing like, hey, I am experiencing all these ruptures in my different relationships and I want to repair. What do I do?
Great question. I think the final takeaway that comes to my head is that we are all much more alike than we are different. We all struggle with these conflicts in some way, more so similar than dissimilar. I think as humans, also, we are wired for connection, yet these tribal instincts, they can sometimes divide us or cause us to build walls where they shouldn't exist. And I think there's a lot of beauty when we lean into empathy and recognize that we have so much shared humanity and we do have the space to connect and share how we're feeling and really uplift each other. There truly is room for everyone to thrive. And I think there's just a reminder that supporting each other, it's not just kind and being honest, it's not just for the other person, it's truly what we're made for. And it can make us feel so alive and full of purpose. So I challenge you to kind of take on that mentality today, extend kindness to strangers, be genuine and honest with how you feel, even if it feels uncomfortable, and just try to carry this lens or see the world through this lens that we have so much more in common with the person behind the counter or on the subway ride next to us or in that Pilates class than we realize. And it's up to us to really fill those gaps.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.